Good morning, afternoon, evening or night. Whenever you're watching this, welcome to this lockdown time video. Possibly fossil hunting, certainly foraging, but mostly just a varied walk in some of the beautiful woodland that West Yorkshire has to offer. I'm filming this in springtime 2020 and things are very uncertain at the moment, so I don't know if or when it will be uploaded. But it's something I can film right now, and that will help me feel like I'm doing something positive and keeping productive. Starting out from Hexagonal, which for most of its history was a community of handloom cottage industry, mentioned at least as far back as the Domesday Book in 1086, it's got some interesting parts in its history. This date here, though, not that interesting, probably a commemoration of the construction of a farmhouse nearby, and this is probably not its original position, certainly not the original piers it sat upon. Now do I want to pick some of those false purple dead nettle flowers for a salad? Nah, looks like the sort of place a dog walker might wait patiently. This is not the way I would usually go, but somebody requested that I film a bit around this unusual chapel. It's one of the very few surviving hexagonal Methodist chapels, the design and build of which was overseen by John Wesley, the founder of Methodism, who did preach here quite frequently, built in 1764. Before it was built, the Methodists refused the existing church and worshipped instead in a small dell in the woods. It's apparently quite a famous place locally, but I haven't been able to find it yet, or if I have stumbled upon it in my wide wanderings, it's had no helpful infographic board to identify it and explain its historical use. This place has a small graveyard with a gentle feel about it, although it does kinda look like it's officially closed for the time being, possibly because of a pandemic, or could be because of an unsafe wall that needs repair work. Anyway, it's my second favourite graveyard in Hexagonal, and in normal times quite a lot of people come to see the chapel. Down this way, there be chickens. Having lived in this area for most of my life, I've taken these dry stone walls for granted. I do know what it takes to make one. It's a specialist skill that I understand but don't have, completely different from house building, and without mortar of any kind these walls can potentially stand for centuries. I think there's a very few that may well be over 1,000 years old, but most are from the last few centuries, and these particular ones are probably 18th or 19th century. I think when I was much younger there was no pavement here, and to this day I still prefer walking along the wall top, perhaps so I can see if there's anything interesting down on the hillside. Used to be a spot where people would throw things they'd prefer no one found, notable examples being the stolen cash boxes from out of telephone boxes. I found them. Here's the end of a track I'd usually come down or walk up if I were heading towards Heptonstall. This woodland is pretty good for mushrooms in the late summer, early autumn. I'm not sure if I should ever attempt a mushroom foraging video though. There's only a few which can't easily be mistaken for other poisonous varieties, and it's much safer to see the differences first-hand explained by a competent teacher than it ever is to see it on film and think that that's a good enough source to trust. You should never ever trust a video as a definitive source on plant or fungus identification. This pathway was originally built for horse-drawn wagons to use. It's cobbled in parts, and hard to imagine how they could have managed some of the steeper bits. During lockdown, I find myself checking all directions. If there's people coming, it might be easier to keep my distance by taking a different path. I can't see or hear anyone coming, and the birds aren't shouting out territorial warnings to anyone but me. So we've got a choice of pathways. Votes down in the comments. Will not influence me, but I do wonder how many of you momentarily thought it would. Once upon a time, I thought I was a competent enough rollerblader to skate down this hill. I'm not sure if the camera is going to reveal the gradient, which I reckon is about 25 to 27%, or roughly 1 in 4. I didn't crash, and I did make it down safely, but it was terrifying. The reason I chose this track to practice skating on was because the tarmac had been recently laid, so aside from a few twigs, it was a great surface for small wheels, and it's usually quiet. It wasn't entirely quiet that day. I got around the corner at the bottom to find a group of walkers milling about, and I had to jump over the speed bump there in full view of them all while in a state of abject terror. I did pull it off in a flailing zero panache kind of way, and I could feel the gaze of walkers who I imagine were amused, bemused, confused even by what they had witnessed. I didn't look back. The speed bump is just a bit further on, and I think today we'll risk heading down here. I can move fast and far enough off the path to socially distance from anyone coming up, and I fancy heading to Lum Falls, which I imagine on a sunny day in strict lockdown times will actually be quite busy, because people are sadly quite predictable. This path too was once a cobbled roadway, wide enough for horse-drawn carts and carriages to use. Most of the cobbles have been washed away now, though I'd guess that some remain beneath the rough ground to either side of the current pathway. This house on the right was once 2 mill cottages, with a further 2 where the garden is now, and down there is the overgrown, silted-up remains of a mill pond. Looking this way through the trees, there would once have been a large 3-storey mill with outbuildings. Only the water wheel housing really remains. Not sure if I'll be able to find old photos online. There are some in frames on the walls of my writer friend's house. She's been a friend of my family for nigh on 40 years, and she owns the site and a house further up the valley, but pandemic, so I can't actually visit her. Rain that joined into rivulets and into torrents down the path brought a lot of material into this, the old mill pond, over the years. And even the feeder channel that used to be full of water, full of frogs and a rich, vibrant ecosystem, is drying up now. Or filling in, which I suppose isn't quite the same thing. And this is where the water wheel was, which powered machines that powered looms, which powered a spectacular growth in the wealth of the area and the wealth of the British Empire, often at the expense of the health of children. This was not one of the worst sites in the area, but child labour happened here, and accidents did happen. Passing by, but politely not filming through the kitchen window of this house, which was once a local post office. I'm not exactly sure when, whether it was a post office for the benefit of the mill community, or only later, when the mill was a partial ruin and partial tea room for the Victorian day trippers who flocked from nearby cities to walk in the woodlands here. They liked to send a lot of postcards home. This is Newbridge, crossing the Headland water, and I have filmed a mudlark in the lower stretches of this little river. It runs through my hometown, Headland Bridge, but up here there's very little to find. A few bits of 19th century pottery washing down from the tiny little domestic farmhouse dump sites on the hills, but nothing substantial. One day perhaps I'll do a river walking video upstream of here. It is quite pretty after all. I've always been fond of that strangely contorted willow tree. This bridge, hardly noticeable as such from on top, was one of the first examples I found of stalagmites forming on the underside of bridge structures. The longest of them when I first found them was about 6 centimetres long, and some of them are now more than 20 centimetres. Anyway, the reason I was under this particular bridge is because it goes over a particular little stream that I used to enjoy rock hopping up the bed of, searching for fossils. For a brief period in the 1810s to 20s, it cut through a patch of black limestone that was busy with aquatic fossils, including nautilus and fish. In my lifetime, though, the only fossils I know that have been found in there, mostly by me, are Lepidodendron stigmaria, and occasionally imprints of bark and leaves from the Carboniferous era. It is up that little stream valley that we're going today, although for the first part at least, we'll take paths. Later on, if things go to plan, we'll be coming down the path that's straight ahead, but for now, into this field. I didn't exactly open the gate. It's currently hard to find disposable gloves, and it was going to be impossible to open without touching, so I found a bit of wall that was falling down and climbed on it without touching, and leapt with something approaching grace over the barbed wire fencing there, and that's why I'm on a different track to the one I filmed at the gate. These lonesome oak trees always seem to take longer than the other trees to wake up after winter. Perhaps they know there's no competition for the light, and they can get all they want whenever they want, so they lie in an extra month or so. Digitalis purpurea, or foxglove, such a fascinating plant, sometimes deadly, sometimes very beneficial. And of course, more dry stone walls, and the bluest sky of the year so far. Now there's a contender to photograph on a darker day, when the leaves are out, perhaps some rain, to go as accompaniment to a poetry reading video of Trees by Joyce Kilmer. Oh, and an extremely robustly built platform where stonemasons cut stone for the local mills and mill ponds, a workspace that will likely outlast all the things built with the stone that was cut there. Entirely hand-built, it's not impressive on the scale of, say, the Great Pyramid of Giza, but this mill pond has been here for about 200 years, and although the inner filling of the wall is slowly collapsing, the outer shell at least will probably be here for 1,000 more years, although it may be buried by that time by sediment that hasn't been cleared out of the ponds. When I was much younger, there was a commonly walked path along here, but it's now probably more sensible to miss out these first few ponds altogether. Spillway, in about 10 years since the water level was high enough for anything to spill, the stream broke through the wall beneath the spill level, and so now the water level in the pond is much lower, and will be mostly silted up soon, just a stream rather than a pond. Here in this little, not quite valley within a valley, between 2 mill ponds and 3 more, lies the ideal conditions for a nice large patch of wild garlic. This might be my primary motivation for coming this way today. Today I'm mostly picking flowers. The leaves are a bit beyond their best. I'm planning on trying to steep the flowers in oil and see if that's a recipe for good or for disaster. There's now a fair few people on the path, both directions, so instead of going up past the underwhelming 3rd and 4th mill ponds full of silt and fallen trees, I'm going to head down to the riverside, and I'm going to follow roughly the little stream that's coming down here, because lower down I suspect there might be some more wild garlic, slower in its development, and the leaves will be better there. Heading down to the riverbank does seem to be becoming a pattern for me, any old excuse to leave the path and find my own. Anyway, it's not a new path to me. I've walked the paths in these woods many times, and perhaps the riverbeds even more. here we are, but the patch looks so small I'm going to leave it be. It wouldn't decimate the patch if I did pick some, but I will probably be too tired to make fresh pesto today after this walk. Yea, there's some wood sorrel here. I'm not keen to keep saying the same things over and over, but there will be some people who haven't heard my previous comments on this plant. So, it's a tasty little leaf that looks a bit like clover. It has white or pinkish tinged flowers, and it has a nice lemony taste, which comes from oxalic acid. There are plenty of foods that contain oxalic acid, most notably rhubarb, and it's sensible to limit your consumption of all such plants because it will give stomachache and eventually overwhelm your liver if you eat too much. So, a stalk and leaves here, a flower there, lightly browsing. I think I see a fossil. Not a great one, but Lepidodendron stigmaria. A stigmaria is a bit like an underground branch off a trunk, out of which soft filament roots would grow. The roots rotted quickly when the Lepidodendron died, but the dimples where they grew out of the tough stigmaria remain. Not a good enough example to take. On any other river this wouldn't be a surprise, but I've walked this riverbed hundreds of times, and this is the first bit of pipestem I've ever found in it. I'm going to leave it, in the hopes that it surprises someone else one day. Deer tracks, and probably quite fresh. It rained yesterday. Another little beach, another Lepidodendron stigmaria fossil, an imprint this time, which for me at least has been a much rarer find. It's not as defined. I guess a mineralized organic structure might sometimes be harder than the mud around it providing the minerals. Looks like there's other organic matter fossilized in this block. Leaves, probably. Can't see anything identifiable. It's just shapeless stuff trapped in a mudstone. Let's turn it over. Nope, nothing. It's a bit big and heavy for the walking I want to do today. So, onwards. Sorry, rock shifted under my foot, almost got wet. This is your regularly scheduled stop for wood sorrel. I don't know how much filming of just rock hopping I should do. Might get kinda samey. We'll see. It's an experiment in filmmaking. You can tell me afterwards if it doesn't work, or if you enjoy it. Please do. Fossil. Indentation fossil of a stick or a bone maybe. I'm pretty sure that's not a hagstone style of hole. Looks like there's another one. And one more on the back. The bubbling look of it gives me pause, but it's not volcanic or metamorphic though. It feels like millstone grit. Was probably laid down as swampy, gritty mud with sticks in it, and the sticks mineralised into something softer than the surrounding gritstone and got eroded out. That's my guess anyway. Anyone know better? Quite an interesting specimen anyway. Shame it's too heavy. Now, I'm a little surprised by what's happening ahead. I can see the weir from here. For the last few years there's been a very large log jam in front of it, which was a great spot for oyster mushrooms, and it's gone. Oh my, evidence of another river walker. Looks like a trainer, size 10 or 11. Which gives me pause for thought, because now I've got to choose an exit point before the weir that I'm relatively confident in using without touching, because I've got to be as careful can be. The February floods were quite something down in town, so I suppose it shouldn't come as a surprise to me that up here in the hills the water could shift a few fallen tree trunks easily. It's like a bare skeleton of a log jam that was here. That's a bit sad for me. Contrary to how this looks, this is not a good spot for swimming. The peat in the water makes it look deep, but there's a ton of rocks under most of it, and the central pool where it's deep enough to kinda swim is only about 8 foot across. Plus it is really cold. I know, from experience. On the very hottest, sunniest day of last year, me and my girlfriend sort of swam here, and the ambient air temperature got up to about 35 Celsius, 95 Fahrenheit. The water barely broke 14 C. That's about 57 Fahrenheit, which isn't too bad if you can swim fast and keep your muscles working, but when you've only got 8 foot of swimming space, you can't, and the water takes the heat out of your body fast and carries it off downstream. Not a great example, quite messy really. I wouldn't be surprised if the stigmaria rotted and went a bit mushy before it was trapped in anaerobic fossilizing conditions. Now leave it or take it, that is the question. That fallen tree used to be my way up and down to this spot. It was a nice little bridge to the log jam, and it's gone now. I'm assuming that the other river walker climbed up here and that they touched things for balance and pulled themselves up, so I'm going to try and not do that. Hup. Right, now up to the path, zigzag style. And I shall leave this here for any walker who likes fossils and doesn't have a better example. And on towards the last of the mill ponds, which is on the other side of the river. This is my third favourite mill pond in the local area. I can't swim in it. It doesn't have an enormous population of frogs, newts, toads and birds, but it is a very pretty pond with bulrushes, and in the late summer I've sometimes sat quietly beside it and been inspected from all angles by the alien faceted eyes of dragonflies. Oh dear, looks like the stream has stopped running, which means either the pipe is blocked up or the feeder stream has silted up, or both. And that means the pond itself will slowly start to dry out and fill in. Yes, this was the feeder stream, and it's basically blocked all the way along by the looks of it. That's kind of sad. I wonder if the landowners have decided to let it happen, or haven't seen it. I shall ask my friend, who's a ranger for the National Trust, who manage most of the woodlands on this side of the river. Not 100% sure if they look after this pond, though. I know the ones on the other side of the river belong to the farm that owns the field I walked through to get to the ponds. When the stream used to run, that weir was usually dry. The river isn't higher right now than usual, but the water's no longer getting diverted through the pond. Oh well, all the creations of man are subject to the whims of nature, and change is a very natural state of affairs. Looks like a reasonable beach for fossils. Shout out if you see anything. Or look at the scenery and enjoy the sound of the water. I'll keep a lookout. Every time I walk this valley, I wonder if one of these limestone shale layers might be the one that's rich in marine fossils. I'd love to find fossils of almost anything other than plants or shells. I did once, when I was about 10. I found a fossil fish on a boulder at the foot of the cliffs in Robin Hood's Bay, but alas, the boulder was the size of a family car. This bridge is a footbridge. I don't think it's wide enough for horse and carts, and it goes from a woodland path to a house which stands on the site of, and probably contains at least some portions, of a 15th century mill. It was a very small mill, but the first firm record of any mill in this valley. The bridge is nowhere near that old. Late 18th, early 19th century is my guess, probably replacing a previous wooden structure. Now this thing ahead looks to me like a sluice of some kind. I'm not at all sure what it was for, whether it was a very early attempt at making an electric turbine to provide power for the house, or a sluice for extracting gold which, really isn't in this stream, or a very late part of the industry that happened here. I don't know. I just know it probably channeled water, not very far, not much of a drop, and now not even that. Does anyone recognise its purpose? It's the start of the amber light, my favourite time of the day to be out walking. I was hoping that I could be on my way back by now to get the best of it, but I will enjoy it for as long as it remains, and hope that the camera picks up some of the light magic. We're getting close to Lum Falls. It's a beautiful place that sadly is often seen as a party spot out of the gaze of authority. I don't think the lockdown will change that. I think these glasses will have plastic parts, so if they're not touching the water, which non-socially distancing people will surely have bathed in today, I'll remove them. Looks dry, looks remarkably intact too. Not quite my choice of style, but if they turn out to be in good condition, I think I know someone who would like them. Recent, probably unintentional leavings from a bathing individual. Gah, people. I'm still in view of the people, a family having a picnic and a bit of a paddle in the stream. Tempted to leap this dramatic gap dramatically, but I'm a bit tired and that's when mistakes happen, so safety first. The fall should be just around this slight bend, and I can of course already hear that there are people there. Looks like they're packing up and leaving. I shall lurk till they do. I was sat on a rock enjoying a drink of water and a flapjack when I spotted this. Didn't need to touch the water to get it out, so another fossil. And this is the highest up the valley I've found one, which I guess means the layer they're coming out of is probably quite near to the top. It's not a great fossil, so I'm not going to take it. And sorry if they've stopped being interesting, they are fairly samey. So, Lum Falls. A pleasant place to visit unless it's a hot sunny day. This day is merely sunny, so it's got more people visiting than ideal for social distancing, but there's at least a short window without people for me to film it. And already the next small group of people are arriving. A good poem, but not a happy one. I don't think it's one I really want to try to record, even though I could easily gather appropriate footage to accompany such a reading. I guess maybe if I get into recording them more and spin them off into their own channel, it's a possibility, but not for this channel. Ooh, a nice example of the different variety of wood sorrel that grows here, much more pink in the flowers than other ones I've caught on film. I don't think I'll film much of this climb. It's about 100 metres long, climbing 35 vertical metres or so up to the roadway, and I will be out of breath when I reach the top. Great place for blackberries though, at the tail end of summer, the top half of this little path. I think it's about 20 years since I've seen my shadow looking so young. On the hillside beyond the buildings there was once a factory site called A.S.M.R. There in 1939 a company called Cape Insulation Limited decided to make asbestos-filtered gas masks for the war effort. There is no strong evidence to date that any of the masks produced there saved a life, but the death toll of people who worked at the factory or lived close to it due to diseases directly attributable to the asbestos and almost complete lack of safety concern from the management has passed 700, making it the worst industrial disaster in UK history, and there are still people living with illnesses that are going to kill them. This path is certainly old and certainly beautiful, but on the right-hand side, behind this hedge that the birds so enjoy, lies a dump site I hope to never find anything from, because it's one of 3 dump sites that the Cape Insulation Limited company disposed of loose asbestos fibres in. It borders a very pretty stream, which I've walked a few times, and I have found a few bits and pieces in the stream from earlier than the asbestos dumping, but thankfully nothing that's recognisably from the same period. It's an entirely sealed dump site now, and I'm glad that I've never found a bottle dig a hole in it. There is no bottle on Earth that would be worth the possible damage to the digger's health or to the environment were they to break through the concrete layer to hunt for old bottles. Still, it's a nice place for a walk, and a very nice day for it. Again, hard to imagine a horse pulling a heavy cart full of goods up this hill, and yet it is for that purpose that these cobbles were placed here, heading down to a pack horse bridge which is older than any surviving records, at least that I can find, so maybe 400 years old or maybe much older. A survivor because it was over-engineered and probably hasn't ever faced a severe challenge. Even if this little stream got higher than it, slammed a tree trunk or two into it, it probably wouldn't budge an inch. We are getting now to the field that goes to the mill ponds, and I shall basically be retracing my steps back up the hill to Hepton Store. So, the interesting things, if they were interesting, have already been said, and camera battery is getting low, so the clips shall be few and short. It's been a glorious day for a 3.5-hour walk, 4 hours by the time I get back, and hopefully the footage I've gathered makes for a reasonable video. It's been a bit of an experiment to see if such a long-form, in-depth walk video would work. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have enjoyed this video, then please give it a like, subscribe if you haven't already, hit the bell icon to get notifications, comment, share, and if you'd like to, you can buy me a hypothetical coffee through Ko-fi, or something off my Amazon wishlist, which is full of ingredients for the many varied videos I'd like to make. Thank you all very much for watching, and for now, goodbye.